Science can only give us a model of the universe. It doesn't matter how good that model is, it can only ever be a model. Now the trouble with this is, although there's a lot of benefits to this model, there's an inherent limitation here. And this limitation is in the message. The implicit message is that we can never directly know reality. It puts an ultimate wedge between us and what is going on. And we must overcome this. This is where we have to go beyond the inherent limitations of science without dismissing science. We've got to give it its due respect. But there is this implicit limitation which we need to address and move beyond. And how do we do this? Well, we consider what this model is being presented to. Science gives us a model. A model by itself is useless. This model has to be implemented by something. It's presented to something. And that something is awareness. It's that very awareness which created the model in the first place. And it's that awareness which presents the model to itself. And in the language of my previous videos, a model is just another story. It's a story which awareness tells to itself. Now, we don't like the word story, do we? We prefer the word model because it's got more of a sense of reality to it, hasn't it, than story. We think of story as fabrication, and a model as something that's based on careful research. Okay, well, we'll just stick with the word model. As long as we understand it's something but created by awareness and presented to awareness. But in presenting the model back to itself, awareness seems to have written itself out of the picture and tries to incorporate itself into the model by saying that awareness or consciousness is just an epiphenomenon of matter. It's a good joke, but we need to see beyond the joke and realize that this model has been constructed by awareness. It is therefore non-different from awareness, just as a story is non-different from the storyteller. It's being told by the storyteller. Without the storyteller, there would be no story. And just as a dream is no different from the dreamer. Without the dreamer, there would be no dream. So without awareness, there would be no model of the universe. Without awareness, there would be no universe. This awareness is our essential being. It's consciousness. Vasistha continued, everyone is pure consciousness alone. What else can there be except this consciousness? It's consciousness which fabricates everything. When consciousness alone exists, what is there to gain and what to reject? When there is no other, Raga, which is attraction or affection, and dvesha, which is rejection or aversion, become meaningless. I suppose in science what we have is the ultimate rejection of consciousness. We're having consciousness rejecting itself. It's amazing how many so-called rationalists will dismiss consciousness, try to sweep it under the carpet or just dismiss it and say there's no such thing. It's a very absurd position. They should really be called Absurdists rather than rationalists. Because if you really applied rationality, you would come to this conclusion that's being presented here. So we don't reject. Attraction and rejection become meaningless because it's all just consciousness. Consciousness alone is human beings, God, Raga. Nagas are the inhabitants of the netherworld. Mountains and moving objects. So what we've got here is we've got a clear mixture of what we might call imaginary and real. But it doesn't matter. It's all consciousness. We don't need to make that distinction between imaginary and real when we're appreciating the nature of consciousness. I am pure consciousness, and so are you. You are a story within consciousness. Get in touch with consciousness. Realize your reality. We shall die sometime or the other, but consciousness does not perish. Consciousness does not have an object for it to become aware of. Hence all talk of unity and diversity is meaningless. It's not that everything is one, because when you say that, you're positing everything. There's only consciousness, and everything else is a story. In consciousness, consciousness is the storyteller. We are the storyteller. Realize the difference between stories and the storyteller. Say hello to the storyteller. Even the materialists, they who believe in the reality of the physical world, allude to this consciousness only because they do not deny the self, the intelligence or consciousness that makes them think and say what they say. Well, this is it. If you said to a rationalist, a hardcore materialist, are you aware? They would say, of course I'm aware. And yet you'll find the very same person trying to dismiss the whole notion of consciousness or awareness and trying to explain it in terms of the rearrangement of atoms and molecules. But the atoms and molecules story is just a story, it's just a model which arises in awareness. Without awareness there would be no story, there would be no universe. The more you consider this, the more you think about it, the more obvious this is. This consciousness is called Brahman by some, Jnanam, that's self-knowledge, Shunya, void, the power of delusion, Purusha, the self, Chidakasha, space or plane of consciousness, Shiva, self, Atman, etc. by others. All these descriptions are consciousness because it is consciousness alone that considers itself thus. So it's consciousness which comes up with all these different ways of talking, of thinking, of stories, of models about what is going on. This is consciousness. This is the heart of experiencing. Why do people deny this? Is it not obvious? You're sitting there thinking about this, perhaps inclined to dismiss it, perhaps inclined to accept it, perhaps in a state of incomprehension, perhaps wishing to dismiss me as somebody who's maybe a little bit unstable. But whatever is going on, whatever's happening is happening within your awareness. It's all going on within your awareness. Acknowledge that awareness. Acknowledge that awareness.